Thank you very much for coming along to this webinar today. This is something I'm calling pilot campaigns and projects. And what I want to try and do is to, by the end of this, encourage you. No, more than that, more than encourage, I would really, really encourage you to take seriously the idea and the value of running a pilot before you go full scale, before you jump right in to doing a project or a campaign. Okay, so that is my task as we go through this session. I really, really want to encourage you to almost obsess about running pilot studies before you do the big thing. And I'm going to be, in essence, presenting the case for running pilot studies before doing full-blown, full-scale projects. And as I go through this, I'll explain why, because to me, right here, right now, this is one of the really, really important reasons why we need to really properly consider the value that we're actually adding as marketers to the organization that we actually represent. And I think this is going to be a really important element, if you like, of kind of adding real value and evidence of the, the critical part that we play within our organization. So let's kind of begin with a sort of an early view, if you like, as to where kind of pilot studies and the whole idea of running a pilot actually began. Well, in many, many instances, pilot studies really started from market research. That was kind of where they sort of grew up, if you like, and where they reached maturity. And typically then in market research, there are two main types of kind of pilot studies. One will be where you're running a small version of a research study, and this you might call something like a feasibility study, or you're running a small version of the full thing. So you're actually running it, but you're kind of trying it out, or what you might term pre-testing. So it is in essence, really, it's just like a miniature version of the full project. And so within research circles, this was always a really, really good way of kind of testing the water before jumping sort of straight in. And particularly if you're working for a research organization and obviously spending client money. So a pilot, if we look at something like, say, LinkedIn, have defined this in a recent blog that they created on running pilot campaigns for advertising within LinkedIn. And they defined a pilot study as a trial run or a dry run or a small scale test to make sure the improvements will work as planned. Okay, so there's a little bit of a target thing coming in here. So if you have an assumption that you're going to be doing this project or this activity, you can then use the concept of a pilot to test out whether or not it's going to work as you expect it to. Okay, so by doing it in a small scale, you're kind of sort of setting the scene for the real thing. Another nice definition of it here is conducting a pilot study doesn't guarantee success in the main study, but it does increase the likelihood of success. And of course, that makes logical sense, really, doesn't it? That, if you do something on a small scale that is almost exactly what you're going to be doing in the full-blown thing, is that the chances are, if you can improve it at a small scale level, you will improve it when you come to do the thing in its full sense. So a lot of this is kind of pretty obvious, really, when you start to think about it. So what I want to do is kind of go a little bit deeper onto some of these things, because we need to kind of figure out whether or not this is going to work for us. Okay, so let's bring this right into the marketing and digital marketing sphere. Okay, so pubmed.nci.nlm.nih.gov define this as a pilot program allows marketers and sales teams to test their messages and target customers, and at the same time provides an understanding of the potential costs and expected results, so leads generated, ROI, etc., without the extensive financial investment needed for a full blast campaign launch. Okay, so there's a lot of things that we can unpick here. And as we go through this webinar, I'm going to kind of delve deeply into each of these elements. But for me, that definition is really quite neat, because what it does is it builds confidence. Okay, so a pilot program doing something without the need to invest deeply financially, and it's not just financial, it's time and it's energy and it's people, without the need to go full guns blazing into this, gives you an opportunity to test the water, test the messages, test the targeting, test the kind of, the delivery of what it is you're going to do without necessarily any kind of investment really, or at a much lower level at worst. Okay, so it gives you that chance to test the water, and that in itself gives an added level of confidence that when you go for it, you're going to be going for it in the right way. Now, it's your confidence as much as your line manager's confidence or the rest of the organization's confidence. Okay, so this is often how it is used as a confidence builder. So how can we kind of build on that? Well, one of the things that I always like to think about if ever I'm doing a pilot campaign or project is about being what I would term forensic. Okay, so this is about doing your detective work down to a forensic level and really obsessing about the detail. Because what you don't want to do is just pay lip service to a pilot campaign or project. In other words, oh yeah, we did a feasibility study and we kind of watched a little bit, but now we're just going to go blindly into, just doing the full thing. And we didn't really listen. We didn't really pay attention. Now that isn't being forensic. Okay, so being forensic is actually narrowing down specific bottlenecks or preliminary problems early on. It's about identifying and pinpointing potential problem areas in this pilot phase so that you can make necessary adjustments promptly before implementing the solution at scale. It's a definition from abr.com. So there's a lot of people kind of talking about this and kind of trying to sort of unpick the detail behind the value that a pilot campaign would have. And of course, lots of these definitions, lots of this kind of thinking is going to be useful for you if you have to prove the case. Now, I know a lot of you thinking this, listening to this will be thinking, well, okay, it's all very well you saying this, Neil, but maybe you've got a client budget to spend, or maybe you're doing this for your own business. But what about me as an apprentice and or a marketer listening to this? Kind of what can I actually do about this? Because it sounds like potentially quite a good idea and a good thing to do, but kind of where do I begin? Okay, so what I want you to be thinking about as we go through the rest of the material here is I want you to be thinking about, can I create evidence that shows a better return on investment? Okay, because that is ultimately what you're trying to do here with this pilot. Okay, so what you're doing is you're only investing a small amount of energy, time, resource, budget, to actually see if you can get some return on investment, some ROI from this campaign or this project. Okay, so you're going to do it at a low scale, a low level. So you might invest $10, for example, in a little test ad campaign. So rather than the full budget, you're just going for a little piece of it. And you're going to do exactly what you're going to do in the full campaign, but you're just doing a small amount of it. And then you're going to watch and listen to what happens. So here's a nice quote here. It permits a thorough check of the plan's statistical and analytical procedures, giving you a chance to evaluate their usefulness for the data. You may then be able to make needed alterations in the data collecting methods and therefore analyze data in the main study more efficiently. So it's not just about the outputs. It's not just about the targeting, the messages, the imagery, the timing, the channels. This isn't just about the kind of the outputs. This is about actually how you're going to assess the value of this campaign or project as well. Okay, so this gives you a chance to kind of test the water, but actually understand what it is that you can measure, what it is that you can gather, and what it is that you can evaluate to show that you're adding extra value to the organization. So if you, having done this little test ad campaign, figure out that actually it isn't about likes and followers and stuff, it's actually about engagement. Because look what we managed to get. For that $10, we managed to get 4 people actually engage, and they commented and they shared and they clicked through and they've done something. So $10 equated to 4 people engaged. Now, we went into this thinking it was all going to be about likes and followers and gaining more followers and this awful phrase brand awareness. But actually, look what we saw. We saw people actually engaged. Now, that was a surprise. And we got that for $10. So that's $2.50 per engagement. So if we were to scale that up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the kind of thought process that maybe you'll be able to stimulate by doing a pilot campaign. So be on the lookout for the surprises, the things that you didn't necessarily expect to happen. And of course, you can go into this with all your SMART objectives and your goals and your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and you can go in there confident that you're going to be, getting these great results out the other end, and you just might not. But by doing a pilot study, what you're allowing yourself is to kind of spot those interesting little surprises before then you double down on those things for the main project. So being very, very open and actively listening is key to the success of a pilot campaign. So this particular sort of quote carries on. In simple terms, a pilot can be a very helpful way to manage marketing, target expectations across the business. Evidence-based, not just wished for. So here's an example for this bit then. So if you are being targeted with go away and create a campaign that will get us 500 new followers. Okay, so there's your target. And you're sat there thinking, help, I don't really know how I'm going to do this. Then that's when something like a pilot study can come straight in and really help you. Because what you don't want to do is go all guns blazing into a full-blown, spend and full-blown time and energy sort of commitment until you've actually tested some stuff out. Because you don't necessarily know what is going to work. And you don't necessarily know that your choice of channels to hit that target you've been set is the correct choice. So by doing a few little evidence-based pockets of activity and by really forensically listening, you start to open up the opportunity for identifying the way forward. Now, this can be a very, very useful way of building a new mindset, really, about experimenting. Okay, so I would call this the experimentation mindset. There was a really interesting article in Business News Daily.com, and they were talking about the pilot mindset. And the way they described it was they said, look, adopt an experimentation mindset. Too many businesses are afraid to fail, so they don't put themselves in the position to do so. Often this looks like either avoidance or pursuing new ideas or failure to properly test a product idea before launching it. And they carry on, by adopting an experimentation mindset, you'll be more willing to make mistakes and test a variety of different ideas. Your business model will unlock more long-term value as you'll give more ideas a chance to come to fruition. In this case, failure is also seen as a success because it allows you to better understand what works and what doesn't in this, and this is the key bit, in this ever-changing business world. Okay, so if you assume that here today, this year, this month, this week, this day, exactly what happened at the same time last year or 2 years ago, or your boss comes to you and says, can you run this? Can you do it like this? And we know this has worked before. If you make the assumption in this ever-changing business world, and we know that's a fact, if you make the assumption that it's always going to be like it's always been, then maybe you've failed at that first hurdle. But by adopting an experimentation mindset, taking a little bit of the resource and going and testing it, taking a little bit of the time and spending that time wisely, taking a little bit of the budget and just going and experimenting with that budget. And we're not talking a big proportion of the budget, we're talking small here, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But if you can do that, if you can actually provide enough evidence back to your boss, your line manager, the rest of the organization, that this is a great way of starting to do things properly, because the world is ever changing, so we can't assume that what we've done before is going to give us the right results, then this is a better way of actually doing things, because it is future-proofing. And it really is, because it's tangibly listening to what is actually going on right here, right now. And it's not about putting, the phrase is, putting all your eggs into one basket. Because if you blow the budget, you blow the time on the full-blown campaign from the off, you might have missed that moment. This might have been a moment where, by doing a pilot campaign, you could have changed everything. You could have identified at a small scale very quickly the thing that was required, that particular customer need to solve, that particular channel that, well, we just haven't had the time to test that one out before. Well, maybe now was the time to do it. So what would you put into the kind of the elements pot, if you like, to test in a pilot campaign? Well, there's a whole range of different things. And already we've touched on some of these as I've been talking. I mean, obviously one is target audiences. You can pilot different target audiences and see what happens. Again, we're talking small numbers here, but just by intrinsically watching at a forensic level, you can then identify, well, which one's a little bit more receptive to this particular campaign. So being really, really focused in on target personas and really going sort of deeply into sort of understanding how they're reacting to the campaign is vital. Timing, there's another one. You can actually change the time. You can do A/B testing of timing. So it might be that, you send the first batch of this test campaign out in the morning, second batch in the afternoon, or you do one on one day of the week, you do another batch on another day of the week. You can figure this out for your own example, but timing you can really test, because timing is crucial. We know that certain times of the day will get better social activity, social engagement than other times. And the choice of marketing channels is the third thing that you can test. We do make an assumption, and lots of us do make assumptions that certain types of target personas are active or not active in certain social networks. A lot of people are still telling me, oh no, TikTok, that's for the kids. It isn't. It was last year, but it isn't right here, right now. TikTok's for everybody and everything and everyone. You've just got to figure out how to do it. So making assumptions over the marketing channels based on yesterday's data and yesterday's results is actually quite naive. And as marketers, we need to really toughen up a bit here and say, actually, I should and could and actually really must be testing out my marketing channels as I start to think about the campaigns and projects that I'm going to be doing. Obviously, the next one, number 4 on the list, is creative messages. Yes, clearly you can test all the different sort of styles and types of message and design and layout and format and color and imagery and video. And so the creative and messages can be tested within a pilot campaign. And what's not to like about that? Because if you can find very, very quickly the creative that worked, the hook that worked, the title, the strapline that worked better than all of the other options, then that is what you're going to double down on as you go into the main campaign. So clearly there's a big benefit there. Another one that's really quite a good one, and often this gets missed in pilot studies, is testing out different calls to action. If you have a button, for example, on a number of different emails that you're testing and you send out, and maybe that button is in a different color. A lot of people put red, as the button to click, but actually often blue is the call to action color. There's a lot of research that goes behind, if you're wanting to get people to click a call to action button, make it blue, test blue and see what happens. You might be quite surprised, actually. And it's not just that, it's kind of any kind of call to action that you're making, you can test in advance and then watching very, very closely to see the different results. And these could be subtle. You might be looking at 0.1% difference between a certain call to action and another. But that 0.1%, when you scale this up to a full campaign, could be the difference between success or failure of the project itself. So, be really precise, test lots of different options and be creative. This is your chance and your time to be creative at the pilot stage, not testing stuff out in the main project. Key performance indicators and targets. This is your reality check, really, because if you are able to go back to your boss or line manager and say, look, actually, you wanted 500 in this campaign. It's not actually going to be 500 because I've done the maths based on a pilot study that I've done. And actually, we're looking more like 600. It could be an upside. I think you thought I was going to say it's going to be less, but it could be an upside. It could possibly be that. But until you've actually done a target pilot campaign and then actually looked at the numbers, this is a way of actually getting some sort of sensibility, if you like, to the targets that you're setting. And then, of course, the key performance indicators those little step-by-step sort of benchmarks or little flags that you're going to be sort of watching en route between the start and the end of the campaign, those will become then much more accurate. And as we've just talked about just a few moments ago, different ways of measuring the success of the main campaign can be another thing that you might uncover some different opportunities to measure and value different things by running the pilot campaign. Now, can you just imagine if you took that list to your line manager, your boss, or to the board, or whoever it is who's, tasked you with running this project, and said, look, I want to do a test because here are some of the things that I really want to be testing out to improve the quality and the outputs, and of course, then the outcome from this project. Will you just give me 10% more time? Just give me 10% more time, and I will almost certainly assure you that I will be able to fine-tune at least one, if not a number of these particular criteria or these elements to improve the final output of the main project. Who is going to say no to that? Very, very few people, because if we're looking at continuous improvement, this is one of the surefire ways of making those positive steps going forward. So I started then to introduce this idea of 10%. So one of the things, and there's been, again, a lot of research done about this, and this was a particular quote that I when I was researching to put this little presentation together, I found a quote that really kind of sums it up, really. But if you're looking at around about 10% of the overall resources for your project or your campaign to devote to a pilot, okay, for me, this feels about enough, because often the question is, well, how much is enough? Is it kind of half? Is it 1%? Is it kind of, what is it? This particular quote says a solid 10% is enough so you can make an impact on your brand, but it's not so much that you'll regret spending it if the pilot doesn't go according to plan. Because at this point, we've obviously assumed that by running a pilot campaign, it's going to go well, and that by listening and being, actively present with the forensic results that we're going to be monitoring, all's going to be good at the end of it. But of course, it might not. The result might come through loud and clear to you from the pilot that actually we should not be doing this campaign. This is not a good idea right here, right now, for these reasons that we've uncovered. And if you've only committed 10% to find that out, that is almost as valuable, if not more valuable, than actually spending a whole bunch of money to find out later that something wasn't going to work. So probably 10% of whatever it is, the time, 10% of the people, 10% of the budget, if you're looking to spend on this particular campaign or project, that's probably enough. That's the kind of scale. Save your 90% if all goes to plan for the full campaign or project. So just be thinking about around about sort of, 10%, there or thereabouts. This is not precise science, but you can go away and test, but it's that kind of level that should give you enough to give you the confidence to be able to present back, this is now my revised version for the full-blown campaign. So having done that, you've done it, you've started to kind of put it together, you know what you're going to be testing. Then it is about adapting it as you go and optimizing en route. Okay, so this phrase, and you'll probably have heard me sort of say this phrase before, continuous improvement. Okay, it's a phrase that kind of gets bandied around quite a lot, but it's so important within a pilot study. Because if you are listening forensically, if you are watching everything that moves, everything that happens as you go through this pilot campaign, this pilot project, then you have an opportunity as you go through the pilot to adapt things, to fine-tune them, to maybe do a retest of the test or a retest of the retest of the test. So you're constantly adapting things and watching and monitoring. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be improving things at each step or each time you actually do change something, but you'll understand why certain things happened. So if the numbers go up, you'll know why. If the numbers go down, you'll be able to critique why that would have happened. So constantly optimizing the information and the experience that you're getting back. So this is why I'm saying it's about being forensic. You mustn't miss a trick. This is a real investment of this 10% that we're investing here in this pilot. This is a real investment. We're not spending on this, we're investing this. So we want to get a return. So the optimized return is the report you're going to create for yourself and maybe to present to others if you need to make some changes for the full campaign. This is what we're collecting here as we go. So testing, adapting, and optimizing en route, and doing this live. Okay, this is the really important thing, doing this stuff live and watching what happens almost in real time, because this is fast track. You haven't got the luxury of time here. This is not the full project. So you're going to have to do this stuff fast and efficient. And so one of the ways that you can do fast and efficient within a pilot study is to do A/B testing. So A/B testing is a very, very simple, very, very simple theoretical approach, if you like, to testing something. Now, often as marketers, because we like to say yes, because we've got, as my wife would describe it, waggy tails, because that's the kind of people we are, you know, we love to do what we do, we're energetic, you know, we want to kind of make things happen, we want to see great results. We often try and change too much too soon. Okay, so the principle of A/B testing is that we change one single thing to test version A against the new version B, but we can only change one thing. Because as soon as we change two things, we don't know which one of those two things made the difference. But if consistently and continually, we just change one thing and then watch what happens, and then change one more thing and watch what happens, and then change one more thing and watch what happens. So you kind of see what we're doing here. So A/B testing is testing version A versus version B, and there must only be one difference, because that difference made the difference. Okay, so in a pilot campaign, pilot project, pilot study, A/B testing is your friend. You must never forget A/B testing, because if you try and do too much too soon, and there's always that pressure on us to get the pilot study completed quickly, finish this particular project as fast as you can, because we haven't got time. We've got to launch this product, or we've got to do this campaign because we need sales, or, you know, there'll always be a pressure on you. But never, ever compromise the importance of A/B testing, because otherwise, when you change something and something moves or something's different, if you've done more than one change in that test, you won't know which one made the difference. And then the whole thing then just tumbles like a pack of cards, and you've wasted your pilot opportunity. So A/B testing really is your friend as you go through this. Super, super important. And I always say as well is only test what you'll be bothered to potentially change. Okay, some people, when they do this, and I've seen this a lot over the years, is people will kind of be doing this almost as a box ticking exercise, almost as a sort of a theoretical value. I always say, look, and this to me applies with marketing generally, is that only really go for what you'll actually be bothered, or what you've actually got the resources to potentially change. In other words, if by testing something that's really, really way out there, you know that actually we're never going to get the sign off to actually do that, then you are wasting time. Okay, so keep things within within reasonable bounds. Keep things within a sort of a sensibility. And of course, if you don't think you've got the resources to be able to kind of this time in this project, be able to really make all those changes or make all of those improvements, then just test and just improve what you know is going to be acceptable, or which you know would be possible or feasible within the main campaign. So don't try just with your enthusiasm to bite off too much. You could do that next time, maybe do it next campaign or next project. So keep things kind of reasonable and sensible as you do it. And if you think it's kind of gone just that little bit too far, just reel yourself back in a little bit, and then you'll keep things on side and you'll keep things really, really practical. And with the idea of keeping things practical, I am a huge advocate of minimalism and a huge advocate of keeping things simple. And this is where you might just want to almost use as sort of a double checker the concept of MVP, minimum viable product. Okay, so if you are in a product development role, you'll know what MVP is. It's the minimal version of the product that you could launch with enough value to make it worth doing. Okay, because a lot of people in marketing want to add this feature in and add that feature in and do this in the campaign and do that in the campaign. And often it's just to make it look bigger and more clever. And it's kind of almost ego coming into play here. So what I always say, the value of minimum viable product, but well, let's call it minimum viable project here, is think about your pilot study at its real bare bones level. Okay, don't try and achieve too much too soon. Keep things simple, keep things well-defined, keep things manageable. Don't add in extra kind of bloating or extra kind of features around the core of what you're looking to test. Keep it simple. If you're tasked with increasing engagement from this level to this level, keep that as your focus. Don't think, oh, well, just whilst I'm at it, I can actually load this bit in as well. And, oh, I know I've got that task to do next month. Why don't I just lump that in with it as well? And suddenly you find you've overcomplicated everything. So keeping things really, really simple. So minimum viable product or minimum viable project or campaign in this sense will really be your friend, because the more you can keep it simple to the point of minimalist, the more you can see the clarity of what happens when you change something. Okay, so just try and avoid, if you can, just try and sort of fight back or push back against overcomplicating stuff. And of course, it might not be you. This might be somebody else saying, oh, well, can you add this in as well? And, oh, by the way, we've got this thing. I've seen quite recently as a lot of organizations in lots of different sectors are kind of trying to bounce back and sort of reinvent themselves and see kind of gains and growth after the last couple of years of challenges. They're trying to kind of load their campaigns with lots of stuff. And I love that word stuff, because it's kind of, that's how it looks to us as the recipients or the consumers of the stuff. And what they don't have necessarily is a single clear call to action. They've given us like 4 or 5 calls to action because, hey, look, we've got in this message, you can click here and get this, but whilst we've got your attention, why don't you click here and do that? And look over here, there's something else to distract you. And then you end up as the recipient of the message thinking, oh, hold on a minute, this is all just too heavy, it's too complicated, right, goodbye. And you delete it or you're gone. So the concept of and the value of minimum viable product just keeps things simple. There's a simple journey. There's a simple step-by-step, there's a simple testing process and a simple pilot process that you're creating here. So keep it simple. The more simple you can make it, you kind of feel possibly as a marketer, oh, I might be missing out because there's a gap there that I could have stuffed something into and that would have probably looked good. But actually it's a complication. We know that people's attention spans, let's come back to our ad campaign. We know that people's attention spans are so short now. Overloading, overcomplicating the journey or the call to action and making it multiple, so it complicates it for the user or the visitor or the receiver will be a surefire way of losing the attention. So MVP is your friend. So keep it simple. Whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you're trialing and testing, make sure you're just testing 1 or 2 things, and using A/B testing, you're doing them one at a time. Don't try and overload. It's one of the key ways that pilot studies kind of fail, is because they're not kind of doing what they had set out to do, because they're just taking the opportunity and kind of overplaying it. So let's just assume now you've got the commitment to do that 10% of investment of time and energy and money to do this little pilot study, so that you know what it is you're going to do going forward. When is it time from pilot to go full scale? When is it the right time to stop testing and go for it? When is it time to kind of say, right, okay, I know enough, let's go now forward with the evidence? To me, there's a very, very natural point when you become aware that you're overthinking it. Okay, but kind of builds on that previous point I was making about the minimum viable product. It talks about when you start to overthink and start to complicate stuff and you feel yourself kind of falling into that, oh, well, I could just add this little bit, and oh, I could just do, that's the point where it's the end of the pilot. Okay, that's the point when you've got enough evidence to say, okay, we've got ourselves a campaign here, or no, I think it's back to the drawing board. We've got to kind of reinvent this project because actually we've got the evidence now that it's not going to work in the form we thought. As soon as you start trying to overthink it, when you start to find yourself being drawn into overcomplicating it, that's the point to go from pilot into the full scale. You've got enough. The time when you start to overthink it, you start to bring your ego into it, you try to complicate it, you try to, as we say, bloat it out, that's the point when it's time to stop. And it might be actually time to stop. Okay, so one of the things that you need to remember when you do go into doing a pilot campaign or project is that the answer you might find coming out of the end of the project, the pilot project, is that it might be stop and never do it again. That's one of 5 possible outcomes. Don't go anywhere near this. We've just proven as part of this pilot, wow, what a great 10% that investment that was, because we've proven we should stop and not do this. Right, well, we've got 90% of the budget left. Let's figure out what it is we are going to do. That's option 1. Option 2 is, we can park it for now, but it might be worth doing this at a different time. We've proven that there could be some value, but we might need to kind of rework something. So that is option 2, parking it, but doing it at another time. Option 3 is, we're going to keep it running, but we're not going to scale it up at quite the level we thought. We found that there's some value in it. So the pilot study threw up the fact that there's a bit of value here, but it might be just to this target audience, or it could be just for this social network, or maybe just for this next email that we're going to send out. So we're going to keep it running, but at a lower scale than we'd planned. That's option 3. Option 4 is, we're going to scale this up appropriately. So we're going to now invest that 90% that's left over. We're going to go for it. We've figured out using this study, we've figured out what's going to work, when it's going to work, how it's going to work, and how we should play this. Great, let's scale it up. And then there is, and this one's quite a rare one, but sometimes it can happen. Option 5 is going all in, because this is a complete winner. Sometimes, and you might find that if you do this on a regular basis, you might uncover one of these. You get this little nugget of gold, or that little pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, where you've identified as part of the pilot study, oh my goodness, look what we have found. We found the thing that none of our competitors have spotted. We found the thing that we can scale up. Look at the returns. Look at this percentage return. It's off the scale. And that's option 5, where you go all in, because this is going to be a complete and utter winner. Okay, so that one's a rare one. Most of the time, it's probably options 3 and 4, keeping it running, but at a low scale, or just scaling up as you planned. Sometimes you might want to park it. Rarely it's stop it and never do it again, because often if you're really listening, you'll find that there will be some value that's coming through anyway. But occasionally, you might find that there's a big, big winner in there. So if you do, then good on you. This was well worth doing it. And of course, everybody in the organization will see the value of pilots and doing it again. Now, of course, I've said all along here, I'm trying to convince you that doing a pilot study is a good thing. And I genuinely, openly, honestly do believe that it is. And I think that the amount that you'll learn, not just for this project or campaign, but for future ones, makes it a really, really true and pure investment. But there are also examples where there are limitations of pilot studies. So you need to know that there are some times when doing a pilot study might actually limit the outputs and the outcomes. And so the things that might happen here is that you might find that there's a possibility of making inaccurate predictions or assumptions on the basis of the pilot data. And that could be because you just happen to focus on a certain time to do your pilot, and that skewed the results. It might be that you didn't quite do it at a level that was a big enough one to get statistically significant data back. That's often one. Okay, so you just think, oh, Neil said only do 10%, so I only did 10%, and we got some results, but actually, little did you know that that wasn't quite enough to give you a significant set of results, and actually, they were slightly skewed by the time of day, or they were skewed by the channel that you put the marketing materials out through. And so actually, then what happens in the real campaign bears no resemblance at all to the pilot study. So that is a danger, so you just need to be mindful of that. And also it could be the fact that one of the limitations is that, you start to set up a precedent that the business or the organization that you work for or in doesn't actually like this kind of approach, because it's thought of as being a little bit defensive, a little bit kind of lacking, a little bit kind of, short-termism. It's a little bit kind of negative. Well, hold on, if you were a great marketer, surely you'd get it right first time. Well, of course, we know that's not a practical answer, but often that can be something that we might hear. So just be aware that, there are challenges, there are limitations. It isn't a perfect science. But one of the key things you can do here is just recognize that always in pilots and tests and research and studies of this nature, it is about the yin and the yang. It is about the balance. You will find positives, but you'll also find challenges. And just being willing to stop and say no at any point within the pilot study, as well as a little bit later when you start to roll it out and you see things maybe not working quite as you'd imagined or quite as the pilot study suggested they would, being confident enough to say, whoa, hold on, we need to press pause here and reevaluate. Or we might even need to take a few backward steps. Being willing to do that and being willing to challenge what you see is a really, really important part of this process. So there's some real upsides. There's some really lovely stuff within this, but there's also some challenges that mean that you just got to be mindful, really, of how you're doing this and just make sure that you're fully awake all of the time. But to apprentices and to marketers more generally, I would say overall, on balance, the idea of bringing little pilot studies, little test cases into your marketing campaigns and projects is just on balance a great thing to do. Okay, because with so little time and resources available to us all today, a pilot study may provide all the evidence you need to demonstrate the value you have brought as a marketer to helping achieve your organization's strategic goals. Because if it is to give the evidence that says we shouldn't be doing this, then you have just saved the organization from committing resources to something that you've now shown evidence wouldn't have worked. And of course, the flip side is you've uncovered potentially that pot of gold, where if you were to do more of it and really scale it up, it would give even more evidence to the value that you have brought as the marketer. So this is doing it in a controlled sense and a controlled manner. So rather than being a reactive marketer, this is an opportunity to be a real proactive marketer and really take control. So even though you sort of feel you've been given a brief and you've just got to deliver against that brief, it is about being, as a marketer, critical. And that's not negative. The word critical means balancing the positives and the opportunities with the challenges and the negatives, because that is life and that is how we, looking forward, are going to get results. So that's what I'd recommend that you do. So here I will end my case, as it were, on how and why it's a great opportunity to run pilot campaigns and projects within your marketing activities. So the next time you're challenged with something, just pause and think, is this an opportunity to do a little pilot, a small scale version of the big thing, to just kind of test out we're doing it right? Because I would say that almost certainly you'll get some great value from doing that.